What happened when an undercover CEO walked into his own car wash, only to discover that his employees were being overworked, customers were being mistreated, and the manager was quietly committing fraud? Hello and welcome, brilliant listeners. If you're tuning in today, you clearly have an eye for stories with heart, grit, and justice. This isn't just about dirty cars. It's about a broken system, silent heroes, and a leader who decided to roll up his sleeves and fix things from the inside out. Get ready for a powerful story that proves real change starts when someone finally pays attention. Landon Wells had built Aquasparkle Express Wash from nothing but a single self-service stall and a mop bucket. Now, in his late 50s, with weathered hands and a steel-trap memory for customer names, he ran a chain of over a dozen locations across the region. But success hadn't dulled his instincts, especially when it came to quiet problems that corporate reports couldn't quantify. Lately, he'd been hearing murmurs. Nothing loud, nothing concrete, just a pattern. Complaints of rudeness, long wait times, and poor treatment, all coming from the same place. Branch 7 in Maple Ridge. The final straw arrived in the form of a handwritten letter from a father. His teenage son had been turned away and mocked by a staff member after trying to pay for a car wash with a prepaid card. Came home thinking he'd done something wrong, the letter read. Landon didn't call a meeting. He didn't send a district manager. Instead, he disappeared from the office for a week, growing out his beard and donning a faded flannel shirt, a pair of scuffed boots, and a new name, Rick. With a limp added for effect, he walked into Branch 7 on a hot Monday morning and was handed a mop without a second glance. No one recognized him. That was the point. He swept drying bays and unclogged vacuums in silence, eyes always watching. From behind the soap-streaked windows of the lobby, he observed customer interactions, employee dynamics, and the rhythms of a workplace that had gone off course. He didn't need a spreadsheet to tell him something was wrong. He could feel it in the way employees avoided eye contact, in the sighs of customers who left without a smile. He wasn't just gathering data, he was collecting truth, the kind you only hear in whispers. By Tuesday morning, Rick had settled into the rhythm of Branch 7, sweeping out bays before the first rush, hauling hoses tangled from yesterday's clothes, and silently observing everything around him. The sun had barely cleared the rooftop when the day's first customers began rolling in, their tires crunching over wet concrete as the automated wash roared to life. The front lobby smelled faintly of stale coffee and damp microfiber towels, and the only breeze came from a dusty ceiling fan that barely spun. From his position near the vacuums, Rick caught the sharp tone of a voice coming from the lobby. Deshaun, a senior tech with mirrored sunglasses perched on his head and a chip on his shoulder, was loudly mocking an elderly woman who'd asked if the basic wash would remove sap from her roof. "Lady, what do I look like, a magician? If it's been there for months, it's not my problem." His words were flippant, but the sting behind them was sharp and deliberate. The woman blinked, clearly embarrassed, and offered a soft, "Oh, I didn't know." Deshaun turned away without another word. No apology, no offer to help. Just walked back to the drying bay like nothing had happened. Rick clenched his jaw but kept his expression neutral. He stepped forward quietly and began rinsing the stall next to hers, giving her space and dignity as she pulled away. He saw it in her eyes, the flash of disappointment, the discomfort of feeling like she shouldn't have asked. She drove off without a receipt, her rearview mirror catching just enough sunlight to highlight the frown still on her face. Back inside, Jasmine was juggling a phone call, a customer complaint, and a walk-in order with no backup in sight. Craig, the manager, hadn't shown up yet. Not unusual, according to the whispered comments between techs. And Deshaun? He leaned against a wall with a coffee cup in hand, already bragging to another worker about a real easy upsell he pulled on a guy who didn't know what a wheel seal was. Rick took it all in, the lack of leadership, the disrespect, the thinly veiled contempt toward customers. This wasn't a bad day. This was the norm, and as he watched Jasmine calm an irate customer with grace she wasn't trained for, Rick realized that the wash might look clean on the outside, but something underneath was filthy, and he was just getting started. By midweek, Rick had become part of the background at Branch 7, just the old guy with a quiet voice and a reliable broom. But in silence, he saw everything. Miguel, a young technician barely in his 20s, impressed Rick with his attention to detail. Whether it was buffing water spots off chrome or carefully cleaning undercarriages, Miguel moved with a purpose that stood out. Yet even excellence had its burden. "This is my third double shift this week," Miguel admitted under his breath as they hauled out fresh buckets. "Two guys called out and no one even bothered to text me. I just showed up, like always." Rick asked him why he didn't speak up. Miguel gave a small shrug. "It wouldn't change anything." His tone was flat, not bitter, and that's what troubled Rick most. He'd already learned to expect neglect. Inside, Jasmine was doing the job of three people, fielding calls, handling refunds, managing walk-ins, and dealing with late arrivals. Craig had appeared briefly that morning, half an hour late and glued to his phone. He barked something about a vending machine complaint before disappearing into his office, the door slamming behind him. There was no morning huddle, no status updates, no support. Jasmine kept a calm face, but Rick noticed the way her fingers hovered over the keyboard a moment too long between entries, as if bracing for the next problem to erupt. What disturbed Rick wasn't just the obvious disorganization, it was the quiet normalization of dysfunction. No one asked for help because help never came. The shop ran on duct tape, determination, and denial. Miguel worked with worn-out tools, patching them together with tape. Jasmine reused printer paper because they were out and Craig hadn't reordered supplies. No one complained, they just endured. The place didn't feel broken from a single incident, it felt hollowed out from the inside, day by day. The smiles were strained, the shoulders slumped. Rick knew the danger wasn't loud, it was in the silence, the slow erosion of care. These weren't bad employees, they were good people, abandoned by bad leadership. And while the cars were getting cleaned, the human cost behind the sparkle was growing too heavy to ignore. It didn't take long for Rick to confirm what he'd suspected. This wasn't a problem with just a few bad attitudes. The rot started at the top. On Thursday morning, while helping Jasmine sort through parts delivery receipts, Rick noticed a shipment that didn't match any job order. A set of high-end wax treatments and premium tire cleaner that no customer had requested. Jasmine frowned, flipping through the logbook. "These are Craig's additions," she said quietly. "He pads orders near the end of the month to boost numbers, says it makes us look more profitable." Rick raised an eyebrow. "And corporate never catches it?" Jasmine offered a tired smile. "Not if he cancels the open work orders before closing day. It doesn't stay on the books long enough to flag." It was a trick one Craig had clearly refined over time. Small enough to slip under the radar, frequent enough to pad his reputation. The financial misconduct was only part of the decay. Rick saw Deshawn run a deluxe interior cleaning for a car that had only paid for an exterior wash, then mark it as an upgrade on the system. The customer never asked for the add-on, never even noticed, but the charge went through anyway. When Rick quietly questioned the move, Deshawn shrugged. "It's all the same. They're going to drive off happy regardless." Rick said nothing, but inside, the tension tightened. Worse, Craig not only allowed these practices, he endorsed them. Later that day, Rick overheard him laughing with Deshawn behind the drying bay, joking about suckers who don't read receipts. It wasn't just a lapse in oversight, it was a culture of indifference bordering on exploitation. And it trickled down into everything. Miguel had been asking for new buffers for weeks. Craig told him to make do. Jasmine had logged a request for more microfiber towels, denied. But somehow Craig always had the newest wireless earbuds, fresh shoes, and long lunch breaks that bled into early exits. For Rick, the pieces were falling into place, the inefficiencies, the employee burnout, the customer complaints. This was no accident. It was the inevitable result of leadership that prioritized appearances over integrity and profit over people. Craig had built himself a bubble where accountability didn't exist. But what he didn't know was that the man mopping the floors, the one he barely acknowledged, was the only person in the building who had the authority to burst that bubble wide open, and soon he would. Friday morning brought with it a storm, not of weather, but of patience cracking at the seams. Rick was wiping down vacuum stations when he noticed a teenager pull into the lot in an older hatchback. Nervously clutching a prepaid card, the boy approached the counter and quietly asked about a basic wash. Deshawn, leaning against the register with his sunglasses pushed up onto his forehead, didn't even try to hide the smirk. "You serious, kid?" he scoffed. "You think we're going to waste a bay on your little matchbox and a gift card?" his voice carried across the lobby. The teenager flushed red, stammering that it was all he had. Deshawn waved him off. "Then go to a gas station. This ain't charity." Rick's jaw clenched so tight it ached. Customers nearby turned their heads. One woman gave the kid a sympathetic look as he backed out the door, head down. Jasmine, caught between phone calls and a walk-in, hadn't even heard the exchange. Deshawn was already walking away, muttering something about kids these days under his breath. Rick, fighting every instinct to blow his cover, stepped outside and watched as the boy climbed back into his car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. He didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, shoulders tight, embarrassment radiating through the windshield. That night, Rick waited until the shop closed before slipping into the office. The logbooks were right where Craig had left them, carelessly stacked, corners bent, timestamps inconsistent. Rick flipped through the pages, invoices with mismatched part codes, jobs marked complete with no corresponding charges, supply orders that didn't line up with customer needs, the evidence of a shop runs on shortcuts and scams. Not just laziness, not just incompetence, a full system of quiet fraud enabled by a manager who no longer saw customers as people or employees as worth protecting. Rick stood in the middle of the office, the fume of the overhead light buzzing like a warning. This wasn't just about dirty floors or botched upsells anymore. It was about dignity, about how people were being treated when no one was supposed to be looking. And now someone was. The boiling point had come and gone. What came next would change everything. Saturday morning at Branch 7 started like any other. Jasmine was behind the desk checking the day's schedule. Miguel was unboxing supplies by the detailing station, and Deshawn was already pacing near the bays, sipping his usual oversized iced coffee. Then, at exactly 9:00 a.m., a man in a crisp navy button-down, clean slacks, and polished boots walked through the front door. His silver beard was trimmed, his posture straight, and his ID badge read one thing: Landon Wells, founder and CEO. Jasmine looked up mid-sentence and froze. Miguel, wiping his hands on a towel, stared in confusion. Even Deshawn stopped mid-step. Only Craig, the manager, hadn't noticed. Still in his office, watching videos on his phone, Landon walked to the center of the garage floor and spoke with calm authority, his voice cutting through the hum of the air dryers. "I've been working here all week. Not as your CEO, but as Rick, the guy cleaning vacuums, mopping floors, and listening." The room went completely silent. Craig finally stepped out of the office, confusion quickly turning to panic. "What's going on?" he asked, eyeing the badge. "What is this?" Landon didn't flinch. "This is me seeing what's really happening behind the reports. This is me hearing the way customers are spoken to, watching how staff are overworked, underappreciated, and how trust is being broken every single day." Craig tried to recover. "If someone had an issue, they should have come to me. I can explain." Landon raised a hand. "I've already seen everything I need to." His eyes swept over the team. Miguel standing stock still with his jaw slightly open. Jasmine, one hand still resting on her keyboard, and Deshawn, who had gone pale. "This isn't just mismanagement," Landon continued. "This is negligence, deception, and a complete disregard for the people and values this company was built on." He turned toward Craig. "We'll begin in the office." For a moment, Craig didn't move. Then, realizing there was no hiding anymore, he followed Landon inside. The garage remained still, the whir of machines and clatter of tools eerily absent. For the first time all week, the team wasn't just working, they were waiting for answers, for accountability, and for the hope that maybe someone finally saw what they had been dealing with all along. The door to Craig's office didn't slam. It closed with a quiet finality. Within minutes, word spread. The manager was gone, fired on the spot, and in his place, something unfamiliar began to settle over Branch 7. An uneasy stillness, yes, but also a flicker of hope. Landon stepped back onto the floor, not as Rick, the quiet janitor, but as the man who built Aquasparkle from a single hose and a coin-op box. And now he was ready to rebuild, not the building, but the people inside it. His first move wasn't corporate restructuring, it was human recognition. "Miguel," he said, calling the young detailer aside, "you're being promoted to lead technician, effective immediately. You've shown precision, pride, and patience under pressure, qualities this shop needs to grow." Miguel was stunned. I don't even have all the certifications yet," he said quietly. Landon smiled. "That's what the mentorship program is for. You'll help design it." Miguel nodded, barely able to process the words. Next, Landon turned to Jasmine, who was still organizing the day's bookings like muscle memory. "You've been keeping this place afloat without a title. Starting today, you're acting manager." Her eyes widened. "Me? You already do the job. You anticipate needs, you de-escalate issues, you lead by example. Now you'll have the authority and the pay to match." They wait for applause. Instead, he walked to the whiteboard, erased the outdated scheduling grid, and handed Jasmine a fresh set of markers. "You'll build a new schedule. Prioritize fairness and coverage. We'll provide all missing equipment and replace anything you flag as broken or outdated." Jasmine stepped forward, grabbing a marker with cautious resolve. Deshawn stood to the side, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Landon turned to him last. "You've got experience," he said plainly, "but no one works here without respecting the people they serve." Deshawn nodded once, a hint of defiance in his jaw. "So what now?" "You're off customer vehicles until you complete a 2-week training in ethics, diagnostics, and communication. Then we'll reevaluate. No threats, no dramatics, just a standard and a chance." That was Landon's way. Over the next few hours, a different kind of energy filled the shop. Laughter still hadn't returned, but the weight had shifted. Schedules were being rebuilt, parts were being accounted for, and for the first time in a long time, employees were being heard. Landon wasn't there to punish a broken system. He was there to rebuild something better, starting with the people who had never stopped caring, even when no one noticed. The following Tuesday brought with it a quiet test, one Landon didn't orchestrate, but one he was eager to witness. A familiar car pulled into the lot, the same dusty hatchback driven by the teenager who had been humiliated by Deshawn just days before. This time, the boy walked into the lobby with cautious steps, prepaid card still in hand. But instead of meeting ridicule, he was greeted by Jasmine, who smiled warmly and asked how she could help. When he asked for a basic wash, she nodded without hesitation, rang him up, and told him someone would walk him through the process to make sure he got everything he needed. Then, to Landon's quiet surprise, Deshawn stepped out from the back bay, drying his hands on a towel, and offered a small, respectful nod. "Come on," he said. "I'll take care of you." No sarcasm, no condescension, just a tech doing his job. The right way. From his vantage point near the towel bins, Landon watched it all unfold. The boy followed Deshawn to the bay, asking a few unsure questions about how long it would take. Deshawn, who just a week earlier had mocked the same kid, now explained the process calmly, even offering a few tips about how to keep the car's trim from fading in the sun. When the wash was done, the boy left with a small smile and a thank you that felt like more than politeness. It felt like healing. Landon didn't say a word, but inside, something settled. This was never about saving a company with new equipment or better signage. It was about moments like this, about the possibility of change when someone chooses decency over ego. Deshawn hadn't become a new man overnight, but he had made a choice. And choices, Landon knew, were how change took root. Later that afternoon, Jasmine quietly asked, "Did you see that?" Landon nodded. "I saw everything. It wasn't a grand redemption arc. It wasn't flashy or scripted, but it mattered. The second test wasn't for Deshawn alone. It was for the whole shop. Could they learn from what had gone wrong? Could they do better? As the day continued, Landon saw his answer, not in speeches, but in actions, and it was enough to move forward. By the end of the week, Branch 7 didn't look drastically different on the outside. Same logo, same concrete bays, same flickering lobby light. But something fundamental had shifted beneath the surface. Landon called Jasmine and Miguel into the break room, a folder of notes in his hand. "You two have done more than hold this place together," he began. "You've created a model we're going to use across the entire company." Miguel blinked. "Wait, us?" Jasmine looked both proud and startled. Landon laid out the plan. Jasmine's handwritten job tracking system, follow-up calls within 72 hours for incomplete jobs, and employee-led scheduling would become standard practice. Miguel's inspection protocol, double-checking, detailing quality, and ensuring no customer left with unfinished work, would be added to regional training modules. The change wasn't just reactive, it was replicatable. What began as an undercover mission to clean up one broken branch was becoming the foundation for systemic reform. Landon was no longer just correcting mistakes, he was building a blueprint. Other stores would rotate staff through Branch 7 to observe, learn, and contribute, not because it had become perfect, but because it had been brave enough to evolve. Back in the service bay, Jasmine adjusted the shift calendar with a new sense of authority. Miguel prepped a trainee for a headlight restoration, explaining not just how to do it, but why it mattered. Even Deshawn, quieter than usual, but far more engaged, helped organize the cleaning supplies cabinet without being asked. There were still small setbacks. A shipment arrived missing a box of towels, and a frustrated customer needed rescheduling due to a last-minute call-out. But unlike before, the problems were faced head-on, with calm voices and shared accountability. Landon moved quietly from space to space, notebook in hand, documenting what worked and what still needed tuning. He didn't need perfection, he needed proof that people cared again. Branch 7 had gone from forgotten to foundational, not because of a memo or a meeting, but because people like Jasmine and Miguel had kept showing up with heart, even when it felt like no one was watching. Now, they were being seen, and their work would lead the way. By the following Friday, the early morning sun stretched across the lot at Branch 7 as Landon Wells stepped outside, coffee in hand, watching the day quietly unfold. Jasmine arrived early, as always, balancing her notepad, phone, and a warm greeting for the first customer. Miguel was already prepping a new trainee near Bay 2, walking them through the order of operations like a seasoned coach. Even Deshawn, gloves on and tools laid out neatly, worked with quiet focus. No trace of the brash swagger from just a week ago. Landon didn't need to issue reminders or make speeches. The culture had shifted, not with noise, but with consistent, quiet action. Problems still arose, of course, a delay in parts here, a no-show staffer there, but now those issues were met with a team that responded instead of recoiling. Inside the office, Jasmine's calendar board was color-coded and precise. A handwritten note on the wall read, "Clean doesn't just mean cars." It made Landon smile. He didn't write it, but he didn't have to. That was the point. What had once been a broken branch barely holding together under weak leadership had become a living example of accountability, dignity, and honest work. Landon knew his job wasn't done. Branch 9 had seen a spike in customer complaints, and his next visit would be unannounced. But this time he wouldn't go undercover. Word was spreading. His presence alone now meant something. Before he left, a man in a baseball cap approached him in the parking lot. "Hey, just wanted to say thanks," the man said. "My daughter brought her car in last week, first time doing it on her own, said everyone was kind, made her feel confident." Landon nodded, that familiar weight settling in his chest. The good kind, the kind that said, "This matters." As he climbed into his truck and looked back at Branch 7, he didn't see just a car wash. He saw people, once overlooked, who now stood a little taller. He saw a culture being rebuilt, not with grand gestures, but with steady hands and shared purpose. The road ahead was long, but he was no stranger to long roads. He put the truck in gear, eyes on the horizon. The work continued, but so did the hope. And that, for Landon Wells, was enough. The story of Branch 7 is a powerful reminder that leadership is not about titles or distance. It's about presence, empathy, and accountability. When Landon Wells stepped into his own car wash disguised as a trainee, he rediscovered the truth that often gets buried under layers of corporate structure. The people doing the day-to-day work are the heart of any company. The greatest damage wasn't caused by faulty equipment or customer complaints. It was caused by indifference from the top. But the moment a leader truly listens, change becomes possible. This story teaches us that transformation begins not with sweeping declarations, but with small, consistent choices. Jasmine's quiet competence, Miguel's dedication, even Deshawn's eventual humility, each proved that people thrive when seen, supported, and held to a standard of respect. And for those in leadership, the greatest impact doesn't come from controlling every detail, but from empowering the right people to lead. Ultimately, Branch 7 didn't just get cleaned up, it became a blueprint for integrity. The lesson is clear. When values are restored at the core, even the most broken systems can shine again. Change isn't a memo, it's showing up, rolling up your sleeves, and doing the work.